and welcome to this talk. And we've been chatting here in the backstage, and we were just like, I was telling that how it's a bit scary to do this talk at a Beam Summit with all the experts for Apache Beam. And then I'll be talking about this, my little pet project that I've been putting together in like in the evening time and just like, making it work and just, all this kind of thing. So bear with me and let's see how much fun we can get out of this talk. So before we get started, I kind of want to do a kind of very short demo, and let's see if that works. It involves some sound, so we'll see if my mic is strong enough to pick it up from my laptop, because that was the best way of making it work. So, hey Google, what is the bike availability next to my house right now?
There are 5 bikes available at the moment. Based on historical data, the availability for this station will be decreasing for the next hour. I would suggest getting your bike within next 10 minutes.
Okay, it seems that it worked, and it's really really nice. And that was kind of the final product slash vision slash something that I was doing for uh, that will kind of be the output of this thing that I had been playing around. And I usually do this talk as a kind of introductory and kind of spark a little bit of an interest in Beam and explain what it is. So this is kind of uh, uh, the talk this is going to be. But then this crowd here is going to be a bit more experienced, most likely in that. So I'll try to adjust that a little bit as well. So um, you've heard this thing about the bikes, but let's talk about what happened kind of a little bit before. So a few months or like, well, in this case, I think it's about a year or more than a year previously. So how the whole thing started. Well, the bikes I'm talking about is bikes like this, and you probably have these bikes in your city wherever you are. So I'm based in Norway, in Oslo, Norway, and this is the bikes that we have that you will see on the what is that right side, the blue ones, and the red ones are the same kind of concept of city bikes from I think that was Belgium, actually. That was when I was there for Devox Belgium. So the thing is that this kind of city bikes are in all the cities, but then there are some things with them, because you cannot just reserve it or something. You just pick it up and use it, and then you put it back. And that is really really cool concept. Well, it sounds like that anyway, right? So the ones that the way they kind of advertise it in here in Norway, and this is the I asked them to give me some marketing pictures, because I was like doing this talk, and based on their data, their open API data, and they were kind enough to give me some pictures. So this is the pictures that they kind of advertise this thing, right? It's summer, it's nice, it's the lake there and the green grass, and you just bike there, and it's really really nice. And that's some other pictures of how they advertise it. Again, this is like 3 minutes walk from the where I live, more or less. And again, summer, nice, really warm, and you just bike there and you enjoy the city, and it's just amazing. The thing is that as I told you, I live in Norway, so half of the year the biking experience is a bit more like this. And well, I mean, they kind of still keep some of those bikes available, and some of the bikes are kind of go into the hibernation for the winter or whatever they do with them. But the point is that when the spring comes, they just kind of advertise it like this and say like, oh, you can go and get some bikes and everything. And then you realize that, well, cool, this is really nice. I'll buy this kind of membership thingy, and I'll just pick a bike whenever I needed one, and I'll just go and wherever I have to go, and I'll park it there, and it's going to be fantastic. And you expect them to see the stop. This is a stop right across the street from where I work, and this is you kind of expect it to be like that, full of bicycles. You just pick one, you just go, and all this kind of thing. In reality, the bicycles kind of this is exactly the same stop, just a few hours later. So this is kind of how it sometimes looks, and very often it actually looks like that. And so there are no bikes. All of them are taken. And then the other thing is that when you find one bicycle and you go to your destination, it might be totally full. So there will be no place to park it. And if you don't park it within some period of time, you'll get like some penalties and blah, blah, blah. And you don't want that to happen either. So you kind of want to figure out what to do. And then uh, in the beginning, I was getting a little bit sad, and I was getting a bit more kind of uh, I was getting a bit sad, and I was like, a bit getting like, oh, there's no bikes. I mean, what's the point of using this thing? And how could I, do something about it? And then I realized that, hey, you know what? I know programming. I can do software development, and I've been doing that for quite a few years now professionally and getting paid for that. So maybe I can solve this kind of problem myself. And because well, I'll explain why in a second. So, my first, I'll share you kind of the train of thought that I had, and we'll get to the beam part very soon. So, the thing is that the master plan was to, okay, what can we do with this? We have this problem, we don't find the bicycles, and when we find one, we don't find a place to park, and that kind of sucks. So, they have an app, and that the app provides you real-time information about stations, but there are no historical data. There is nothing like predictions or things like that, and they don't basically provide that. So you need to figure it out in one way or another. So the thought was, okay, fine. Well, we don't have any bicycles, so what do we do? That sucks, right? Where can I find one? Where do I see the bicycle in the app? I'll see that, oh, there is one bicycle available, and by the time I get from my home to that stop, it probably is going to be gone, because other people will see it, they're going to grab it, and well, I'll get to a kind of an empty rack of bicycles. So can I use an app? Well, I can't really, because as I told you, it gives you the real-time information, so that kind of sucks. Can I use a public API? Do they have one? Well, they do. They do have very, very simple kind of very well, in a way you can even call it like well, very simple. Let's call it that way. And but maybe I can do something about it. And the data they provide, as I told you, it's a real-time data. It's basically all you get. Okay, how can I do that? For doing any predictions and stuff like that, I will probably need to collect some historical data and some kind of historical knowledge about the availability of bikes on different times, different stops, different days a week, weekend, work day, kind of all those kind of things. Day, night, evening, morning, all those kind of things. So what do you do? I mean, if I do like as an enterprise developer, that's what I'm kind of usually do at work. I'll probably go all the way kind of crazy over the top with a full data warehouse solution and putting all the data and combining it and doing everything. But then, I didn't really want to convert my apartment into a server room, like a big with a big racks and fans and everything. I kind of really want to do that sometimes because the nerd inside of me says that would be cool. But then I kind of think of the noise and everything. But the good thing, I'll probably get the heating in the winters for free. Free, well, at least as a byproduct of the servers, anyway. But anyway, so alternative number two would be to write something custom and just kind of hack it together, write a script or so, or 10, and kind of keep it maintained and just like, convert that API data into something, put it into database and do all these kind of things. And that was, it wasn't really tempting either because, well, you know how it is with, with the data changing, and you always have to massage your data a little bit and all those kind of things. I didn't really want to do that either. So then I was looking for something kind of a flexible, portable, open source, and all this kind of things. And this is when a friend of mine, a guy that was is working at he's a Googler as well. He works in a region office here, and he was like, "Hey, there is this this cool thing called Beam that it's been some time ago, and he was like, Dataflow and Beam and everything. Maybe you should look into that thing. And so I did. And then I kind of realized that, hey, you know what? I can do a lot of things, and Beam can do a lot of things for me for free without like too much of maintenance and everything, and it's going to work. And that was the kind of the train of thoughts for this project. And now I'm going to try to explain a little bit how it works. And it's going to be a little bit, how can I say it? As I told you, uh, it's a little bit noob version of an intro into Beam from my side because, well, I've been doing a lot of software development. I haven't been doing too much of Apache Beam at that point when I was developing this thing kind of professionally. So, bear with me. As you've heard already, my name is Rustam. I'm going to say a few words about myself, and then we're going to jump into the Apache Beam part of this talk. So I work at a consultancy company called Computas. We are in a few Nordic countries and also in Romania. I've been doing it for quite some time. I'm also a Google Developer Expert for cloud, and in addition to that, I'm also a Java champion, which is a kind of a similar program, just a bit more independent, I guess, for the Java community and everything. So this is what I do every day is a Java architecture and, well, mostly cloud and mostly Google Cloud. That's what kind of I do on the daytime whenever I'm not playing with Apache Beam and stuff like that. So the big picture of the whole project was that um, I had this API, and that API was quite simple. So that API would provide me just real-time data and just JSON, and that was a bit. So I didn't have any streaming APIs and everything like that. But then I was kind of hoping that that will come at some point, and I can probably use that Apache Beam part of that with that as well. But so the first version, the open source version that I kind of put together. Without Apache Beam was to hack it on the Raspberry Pi and put the Pi on my living room table, like by the sofa, and it did so. It did run for probably like half a year or so until the SD card crashed, and then I was like, oh wow, I lost a bit of the data and all this kind of thing. So, but the open source version would be like, okay, I have a cron job of some kind. I have something that will wake up every so many minutes. It will dump the contents of the API, whatever they provide, into a file, and then I want to provide it. I want to process it with something. So, for instance, something, I don't know, say Apache Spark or something like that. I will put it into some kind of database, some kind of data warehouse, whatever, and then I'll be able to actually look at it in one way or another through some kind of UI. And then at some point, if they would provide a streaming API, which I was hoping back then, I'm kind of losing that hope a little bit right now. But I mean, if they would, I would do something like I could do the stream and into for example, something like Apache Storm, and then I can put it into some kind of database again and do some dashboarding and stuff like that. So that was the kind of the open source version. That was kind of the first idea, first thing on the Raspberry Pi kind of prototype 0.0 something. And then at some point, I kind of didn't want to have this two different things going for stream and for the file, the batch processing. And then, well, obviously, I've been told about this Apache Beam thing. That was some years ago. And then I had to look into that. And then I realized that this is actually a pretty cool thing because it actually supports both. So, well, you heard that for at least 2 days now, all the features and cool things that Apache Beam does. So I'm not going to talk too much about that. But this slide I just had to update because now we also have a Go SDK as well, which is really, really cool. You can do it in different languages, and you can just process from different endpoints and read it from different storage uh, possibilities, like options and things like that. That's really, really cool. So this was something that I was looking for, and the reason that was kind of really amazing for me, it was that it was back in the days, if you would do something like that with the pipeline and processing, and you would use something that was a product of some kind, you would probably have to go to like full enterprise thing that you cannot just be as flexible. And here you can kind of, I kind of usually compare it with the Lego bricks, where you can just pull out one brick and you put another one, and just it magically works. And that was a really cool thing. And this part of the swapping components was really amazing, because you could just exchange like pub sub with the Kafka queue or whatever, and then you can do like different storage things. You can do S3, you can do Hadoop, you can do Google storage, and local files and things like that. And you didn't really have to think about it. You just pointed at where things are, and it would just magically fix it for you. And that was a really really nice thing for me. So then the kind of the big picture architecture kind of thing, version 2.0, was to replace everything with Apache Beam, right? So now you have batch processing, you have streaming processing, you put it together, and it works. And as I told you already, this project was also my way of learning more about Apache Beam, to understand how it works. And because I mean, I started looking at this word count example, and I kind of a little bit confused me in the beginning, and it kind of had to change my mind and wrap my mind around things. So it really helped me to kind of do hands-on development. So that was my kind of learning curve as well. So then, at some point, I wanted to move it to the cloud, and I did create the Google Cloud version of the same architecture, where you will see it's kind of the same thing, right? You replace the cron job with some kind of function, or some kind of a timer thingy, and then you replace also the storage and the queues, and then you do the managed version of Apache Beam, putting into data warehouse. So for me, what I did was to put it into a BigQuery, where I can do some kind of analytics, and I can play around with queries and predictions and everything. So how was that thing with like running the putting together a pipeline? That was a concept that I usually explain to people that are not familiar with Apache Beam, and usually I kind of try to explain what it is, and I start with this big words of Wikipedia, which is like, well, it's a cyclical directional graph, and blah blah blah, and basically it's I say, well, what it is, it's just think of it as a kind of conveyor belt or pipeline or whatever. You put something on one end, it does magic, and then there is some other useful thing coming out on the other end, and that's really really kind of short version of that. And then I usually show a bit of how to write a very simple pipeline. Right, it's not this super fancy cool pipeline that we picture of a pipeline and pipes and valves and everything that we saw on the previous slide. It's a very very simple pipeline, and to do that, I usually start with this example of the bicycle API thingy that I had. And what I had there was basically two endpoints. I'll show you just one for now, and I'll show you the other one at some point a bit later. That is the first one is like where you have the availability of the stations for each station, and I wanted to convert that JSON data into kind of a bit more table format. So that was the first version I did, and that was a very simple pipeline, something like this, right? You just read files, you convert, you put it in the way you want it, you store it to database, you're done. And then there were a lot of cool things, and then, well, to do it in a code, I use, as you probably suspected, I use Java, and that's a bit of a like example how to put it together and how to create a pipeline and define it first. Then I create the pipeline, define the options. Then you create the pipeline and you provide that options into that thing, and then you apply transformations, and you can just change them after each other. And that's a really really cool thing, and it's a really nice interesting way of doing so. And then there is this concept of pardos that you probably have heard about that quite a few times. A lot of people haven't, that are not really familiar with Apache Beam. So I kind of go on to explain a little bit about that. That it stands for parallel do, and well, it lets you parallelize things and do things in parallel. Um, and then you can do things like element-wise transformation, and then you can run it. The thing that I really liked with this project, and things I really was kind of the cool thing, was that I could do a local development on my machine and just use a Maven to build it and to run it and just to do everything. But then without doing that much to it, really, just by changing a few options, I could just run it on the cloud. That was a really kind of the cool thing for me, and that's I usually kind of tend to go back and forth on this slide just to show that, well, we have just extra options, and it's basically this thing that we've heard before with some other languages, like write once, run everywhere kind of thing, and that's basically what it is in the data pipeline world as well. And that was the first pipeline that I created back some years ago, and that was really kind of simple one. And this is how it looked. And I run it in Dataflow. It scaled up. I had the data for I think 6 7 months collected back then, and then I just dumped it into BigQuery. Nothing magic, nothing really cool yet, but it was a good beginning. And then I ended up with I think let me see, what is it, 1 million, 1.1 million rows, and just a little bit more than 20, 35 megs of data. So this is nothing. This is not big data. This is nothing. Then I wanted to go a bit further. So I wanted to add also some metadata about stations that you see on the right side. And I wanted to make it kind of work for so I can actually query about things. I can show it on a map. I can do a lot of cool things with it. And then I had to do this kind of the merging of two pipelines. I had two different pipelines processing two different APIs and two different files and JSON files, one about the availability and one about the metadata of the station. And then I kind of would merge them by a common ID together, put them together. And then that was actually getting somewhere, and that was actually getting a bit cool, because then you'll actually see the data giving much more sense. You don't see just an ID that doesn't make sense at all, but then you can actually see the name and the address and coordinates of these things. And then I did it for another batch that was probably a bit more than a year worth of data. And it still was kind of really, really easy to process. And if I would have written something myself, I would have had a computer running for probably a day or so to process all that, or maybe a bit less, depending on the machine. But here I could just like put it in the cloud, it would just parallelize and do magic and everything, and that would be really, really cool. So then I ended up with this group by. I mean, this is not probably the coolest pipeline you've seen ever, but I mean, at least I wanted to play around with this group by thing, and I did that, and it it worked. It was quite fun experience to see this thing coming out on at the other end. So you had hundreds and hundreds of files, JSON files stored on Google Storage, and then at the other end you actually have a BigQuery table with lots of useful data where you can actually query things and see like trends and everything. So here I processed another batch of data, probably a bit more than a year worth, like 1.5 years worth of data. Now I had 30 million rows of data. I had much more data because I was denormalizing kind of data and everything, and putting all into one big BigQuery table. So now I actually had 1 gig of data. So, well, I mean, it's still not big data, but we're getting there, right? And the thing is that the amazing thing was that I got this billing thing popping out on my thing, and it basically said, well, your billing went up 900%, more or less, like 894.74%. And I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be bad. And then I realized that, that was that was it. That my 800%, 900% was basically 3.5 euros. So that's around the same in dollars, I guess, as well. So that was really cool. And then I could actually see how it scales and everything. And that was a bit, instead of this sad puppy picture, I kind of was more about this amazed monkey kind of picture, probably, that was kind of close to my facial expression at that point. I was like, well, I could process so much data, scale machines, and it actually just cost me probably like a half a beer price in Norway or something like that. It's kind of expensive here. But anyway, so the and that was the cool thing. And my experience was kind of this. Okay, now I've built the pipeline, the proper the batch pipeline, but then I could also look into the process, the streaming pipeline, because well. Here I just had files coming after one after each other and everything, and I kind of wanted to look also into the the um, the streaming part. I will probably jump over the streaming part for now because, well, uh, I'll usually talk about things like transformations. I talk about things like windowing and things like that. And here you're pretty much, you've heard that quite a few times already. So I'll spare you for that. And I'll show you some cool features that I kind of find a bit cool. And it's also not too big of a magic, but I still really like how easy it is to query for things. So, for example, things like you doing windowing, you can just like say, well, I want to see like every past minutes, every minute. You just do it like this, or you can actually visualize things with dot files, and that was quite fun. And it took me some time to figure it out how, because the cloud providers, they visualize it in a really nice way, but when you run it locally, you don't see that much about that. So I did, after a little bit of digging, I figured out how to dump this dot files, and I did write a very simple description of that and put it on my blog. So you'll see the link there at the bottom if you would like to check it out. And it's not going to be super pretty, but it will give you a good idea of like how your pipeline looks without uploading it to a cloud provider. Um, yeah, and then the swapping part also, that you can actually replace just storing it to file with a database and stuff like that. Transformations example. Oh, this cool thing is that I when I had this data, I could actually simply plug in another database thing called OrangoDB, and it would just draw me a map of the whole thing just automatically with just a configuration. That was a really cool thing as well. Um, so this was kind of my thing, and I was sitting there with quite a bit of data. And now I could do the prediction thing, and then I could write really ugly and big queries, SQL queries, to actually do some kind of analytics on top of that data. So I could actually figure out where the bicycles will be most likely going to be, where they're going to be mostly broken bicycles, so I won't be able to ride any, and where it's going to be empty, and where it's going to be like what time of the day I should kind of plan things ahead. And that was actually fun, because now I had historical data that I wouldn't have without like creating a bit of a pipeline and doing a little bit of a kind of work. But then, it was kind of cool. And that was, again, back to this amazed monkey kind of thing. There are a few warnings that I kind of wanted to mention that are not very uncommon when we work with data, but if you haven't, they might surprise you a little bit in the beginning. So, thing is that your APIs might change. The data that you're getting, it takes some time to massage it in a way and kind of to digest it, but at some point it will change. It will break your pipeline, so you have to kind of be aware of that. So what happened to me was that my API stopped producing just regular JSON and started doing like prettified JSON. That broke the whole pipeline absolutely, like, fantastically spectacular way. And that was a bit of a weird thing. And well, I mean, it's been a learning project, and I've been playing around. And the whole idea was to kind of push it to open source and let other people learn from it and see how it works and everything. So I put everything on GitHub, and if you want to play around and have a look and like uh, and see how my kind of project looked at the end, you can check out that repository as well. Um, this is contact information. So this is me on Twitter, you see there, and also me on email, and me as well on with my blog. And if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to. If we have any time, you can ask them now. If not, we can do it on Slack. And if that also doesn't work for you, you can also ping me on Twitter. Over to you, Max.
Thanks for the talk, Rustam.
Thank
So
you.
let's see if we have any questions. I There's one question here in the Slack already, which I think you already answered.
Okay.
Is the code available on GitHub? Yeah, it
Yes,
is, right?
it is. It's there. So if you can see it you'll see it very soon on the screen. So
Yeah,
just go to GitHub.
great, great. And let me see if there are any other questions. So, um, why did you choose Apache Beam for this data set size? Did you also consider, because I think the data set was around 1 GB or so, did you also consider using something local to compute the results?
Um, one there are two sides to the story. So one of them is that I wanted to learn Apache Beam because we use it for some other projects and everything. So I kind of wanted to understand how it works. And that was my one thing, because I mean, well, this is the best way of learning, is actually kind of go crazy and do a lot of stupid mistakes and kind of learn from it. But the other thing was that I really liked was that I did have, well, I mean, at the processed version was 1 gig, but in reality, the way I implemented it, again, absolutely not optimal way of doing it, but this is how I did it because that's what I had time for. It was basically one file per. So I was dumping the contents of this API, or like getting the data from the API 4 times an hour, 24 hours a day. And I've been doing it for 2 years now or so. So basically, I have 2 year worth of historical data, but well, multiply 24 hours by four. Times two, because I would have two different files with the metadata, because the metadata about stations would change
Mhm.
and historical data would change. So I had to kind of keep them always dumped at the same time. So I this is what I ended up doing, and this is was for me. It was just a learning curve, really, and a bit more of kind of okay. Let's hack things together and
That,
make the IT work for
Mhm.
me.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, you don't always have to
Hmm.
use big data to learn a new technology, and you can still use the same principles once you have more data. So I guess Beam was just an overall useful framework to transform the data,
Yes.
and yeah, arguably it is. So so I have another question. What was the hardest part for you about Beam? Like when you first learned Beam?
I think the hardest part, what I usually say, the hardest part is to wrap your head around the model. This whole concept of the pipeline, and this thing that some of the things can be parallelized, some are not, and kind of think, because like for example, it took me a while to realize, a little bit of time to realize why uh, Beam would fail miserably on a line with a line separated JSON files, and I was like, why? I mean, how hard could it be? And then I realized, well, I mean, the whole point of Beam is actually parallelizing things. So it wouldn't read the whole file every time and just wait for the whole file to be processed and then start processing, right? It would just read one by one lines. And when you have line separated prettified JSON, it would fail because, well, you get syntax errors, right? So this thing that of things being parallelized, that was a bit of a kind of challenge to realize. Have to think a different way. If you're used to functional programming, you're good. And if you're not, it takes a little bit of time to kind of see
Yeah.
how it is, like the whole function and response and pardoes and all this kind of things. And that when you kind of apply one thing after each other, and those kind of things are a bit challenging, and that was a fun journey learning, actually, I would say.
Yeah. Cool. I think we learned pretty well how your learning curve with Beam developed in this talk, and yeah, we are out of time now, and I'll thank you very much for your talk. Very
Thank you
insightful.
very much for having me. It's been really, really fun. My first Apache Beam summit. That was a really, really cool
Cool.
and experience.
Thanks, Rustam.
Thank you.